The fluorescent lights in conference room hummed with the exact same frequency as a dying migraine, a low, electric buzz that seemed to vibrate right behind my eyes. I stared blankly at the whiteboard, watching as my 20-year career was currently being erased by a woman whose entire personality was a LinkedIn inspirational quote brought to terrifying life. "We're pivoting to a lean-forward posture," Jordan said, capping her dry erase marker with a violent, final click. She turned to face me, a 29-year-old nightmare with an MBA from a university that probably accepts coal cash as tuition and a smile that didn't quite reach her dead, shark-like eyes. She was the CEO's daughter-in-law, a fact she pretended to ignore but wore like a suit of armor. "Evelyn, frankly, your department feels heavy. We need agility. We need spark." Before we dive deeper into this corporate train wreck, let me know in the comments, what city or country are you watching this from? I always like to know where my fellow survivors of the daily grind are tuning in from. I adjusted my glasses, looking at the organizational chart she'd drawn in frantic red lines. My name, formerly sitting comfortably at the top of infrastructure and digital risk, had been moved to a lonely, jagged little box in the bottom corner labeled IP archiving. It was the corporate equivalent of being sent to a farm upstate to chase rabbits. "Archiving," I repeated, my voice flat, devoid of the panic that was currently doing laps in my stomach. "So, you're moving the servers, the encryption keys, and the patent portfolio management to where, exactly?" "The cloud." Jordan beamed, actually doing jazz hands, her wrists loose and floppy. "We're going fully serverless. We don't need you babysitting hardware in the basement anymore. It's 2024, Evelyn. We need to democratize our data." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm and tasted like despair and burnt hazelnut. "Jordan, the cloud is just other people's computers. Specifically, computers I leased for this company 15 years ago under a legacy contract that ensures we don't get sued into oblivion by Oracle. Those aren't just boxes. They are the foundation this building stands on." She waved a hand dismissively, her charm bracelet gingling like the bells on a leper in a medieval village. "Details. You're bogged down in the how, Evelyn. I'm looking at the why. You'll transition to the archiving role effective immediately. Your budget is being slashed by 80%. But don't worry," she added, her voice dripping with faux benevolence. "I'm leaving you a stipend for training. We want you to upskill. Maybe learn some Python, or how to use Slack without sounding passive-aggressive." The room tittered. A nervous, skittering sound. A few of the junior developers looked down at their shoes, unable to meet my gaze. They knew. They knew I was the only reason their commit history didn't crash the production environment every single Tuesday. They knew I was the one who stayed until 3 a.m. when the SQL database locked up. But in this room, silence was the currency of survival. "Understood," I said. The rage was there, deep in my gut. Hot and distinct, like a shot of bad tequila taken on an empty stomach. But on the surface, I was a frozen lake. Unmoving. Reflective. Cold. "I'll focus on archiving and training," I continued, closing my notebook. "Lots of training." "Great." Jordan clapped her hands. "By the way, if you're enjoying watching a corporate train wreck in slow motion, do me a solid and hit subscribe and upvote. My therapist says I need external validation, and since I'm about to lose my health insurance, you guys are all I've got." Okay, back to the carnage. I walked out of that meeting carrying a cardboard box containing my personal effects, a heavy swingline stapler, a stress ball shaped like a hand grenade, and a framed photo of my dog, Buster. Buster had more loyalty in his left nut than this entire board of directors combined. I didn't go home to cry. I didn't go to a dive bar to drown my sorrows in cheap Chardonnay and complain to a bartender who didn't care. I went straight to my new office. It was a converted storage closet on the 4th floor, tucked behind the janitorial supply. It smelled vaguely of bleach, dust, and resentment. There were no windows, just a flickering strip light and a desk that wobbled if you breathed on it too hard. I sat down, the cheap chair groaning under the weight of my exhaustion, and cracked my knuckles. I opened the company's compliance and training portal. Jordan wanted me to use the budget. She wanted me to upskill. Fine. I navigated to the external vendor registration page. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a familiar rhythm that calmed my racing heart. I created a new profile for a consultancy firm called Veritas IP Solutions. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware. The owner was a blind trust I'd set up 3 years ago for estate planning purposes, perfectly legal, perfectly opaque. Then I looked at the asset list. Jordan thought she was streamlining the company. She thought she was cutting the fat to make the beast run faster. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't the fat. I was the skeleton. I was the bone structure holding the meat together. And she had just given me permission to start removing the bones, one by one, to archive them for safekeeping. I started small. The software licenses for the design team were up for renewal. I initiated a transfer request to move the licensing authority to Veritas IP Solutions, categorizing the expense under Compliance Training Simulation, Vendor Management. The system flagged it for approval. And who was the approver? Jordan. 2 hours later, I got a notification on my screen. Request approved. She hadn't even read it. She saw the word training and rubber-stamped it, probably while ordering a matcha latte and firing a janitor on her phone. You want Spark, Jordan? I whispered to the flickering monitor, lighting a cigarette. Yeah, I smoke indoors. Sue me. Nobody comes to the 4th floor anymore. It's a graveyard for the uncool. I'll give you a bonfire. I spent the next 6 hours quietly rewriting the ownership tags on the company's primary domain names. It was tedious work, digging through the registrar's backend, changing administrative contacts, updating billing information. By the time I left, the company didn't technically own its own website anymore. I did. Or rather, Veritas IP Solutions did. And the rent was due in 30 days. I walked out to the parking lot, the night air cool and damp. The asphalt was slick with rain and oil, reflecting the neon sign of the sushi place across the street. My 2014 Subaru Outback looked tired sitting there amongst the Teslas and BMWs of the executive team. I patted the hood gently. Hang in there, girl, I muttered. We're about to come into some money. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Jordan. Hey Ev, make sure you clear out the server room by Friday. We're turning it into a meditation pod. Namaste, asterisk. I stared at the screen until the backlight timed out, plunging me back into darkness. A meditation pod. Right where the main cooling units for the redundant backups were. Right where the fiber optic nervous system of the company converged. I didn't reply. I just smiled. It was a sharp, jagged thing that felt foreign on my face. I wasn't just going to let them fail. I was going to sell them the tickets to their own funeral. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in corporate dysentery. Jordan's version of modernization looked a lot like setting a house on fire because you didn't like the color of the drapes. They brought in the agile coaches. These were guys named things like Skylar and Braden, who wore puffy vests over t-shirts in the middle of summer and used words like ideation, sync up, and optics as if they were religious mantras. They turned the bullpen into an open collaboration zone, which meant they took away the cubicle walls that separated the developers from the sales team. Now, while the engineers were trying to debug the spaghetti code that held our payment gateway together, they had to listen to Chad from sales ring a literal cowbell every time he sold a subscription. Asterisk clang. 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 Asterisk it was the soundtrack of productivity dying. I sat in my closet office, watching the ticket queue explode on my second monitor. Ticket 4902. I can't access the legacy database. Ticket 4905. Why is the VPN blocking the new marketing tools? Ticket 4912. The website is down for Europe. Normally, I would be the one fixing this. I would be the one diving into the terminal, rerouting traffic, soothing the servers like a hoarse whisperer calming a spooked stallion. But I wasn't in infrastructure anymore. I was in archiving. So, I forwarded every single ticket to the new chief digital officer, a guy Jordan hired because he had 50,000 followers on Twitter. His qualifications seemed to be posting photos of his minimalist desk setup and using the hashtag #hustlegrind. Good luck, #boy, I muttered, routing a critical database failure to his inbox. On a Tuesday, Jordan stopped by my door. She was holding a green juice that looked like pond scum and smelled like wet grass. She didn't come in, the room was too small, and I was actively eating a tuna sandwich to establish dominance through olfactory warfare. "Evelyn," she said, wrinkling her nose. "We're seeing some friction in the transition." Friction. I wiped a crumb from my lip. "Is that what we're calling the 40% drop in uptime?" She scowled, her perfectly microbladed eyebrows knitting together. "It's teething pains. Look, the new vendors are asking for the admin keys to the AWS instances. They say the current credentials aren't working." "That's strange," I said, lying with the ease of a career politician. I handed all those over in the transition document. "Well, they're saying the root account is locked to a specific hardware key." I nodded sagely, leaning back in my squeaky chair. "That's a security protocol I installed in 2018 after the Russian phishing attempt. To change the root access, you need the physical authenticator." "Great." She extended a manicured hand. "Where is it?" I opened my desk drawer. It was empty except for a packet of soy sauce and my stapler. I turned it in to HR with my old badge. "Standard offboarding procedure for sensitive assets." Jordan rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might detach. "God, you boomers and your hardware." "Fine. I'll hustle HR. Just keep training, okay? We need you up to speed on the new stack." "On it, boss." As soon as her heels clicked away down the hall, I reached into my blouse and pulled the physical authenticator key out of my bra. It was warm against my skin. The little LCD screen displayed a 6-digit code that changed every 30 seconds. 394002. 881495. This little piece of plastic was the only thing standing between the company's data and total oblivion, and it was staying right next to my left ventricle. I turned back to my screen. I had a training seminar to attend. Subject: Advanced IP Asset Structuring. Cost: $4,500. Vendor: Veritas IP Solutions. I approved the invoice myself. The finance department was in absolute chaos because Jordan had fired the controller, a man named Stan who had been there since the 90s, and replaced him with an app called Spendify. No one was watching the cash flow for anything under $10,000. I spent the afternoon archiving the source code for our proprietary algorithm, the one that predicted market trends for our clients, the one that generated 80% of our revenue. I moved the repository to a private Git server hosted by, you guessed it, Veritas. Then I printed out a 300-page document. I put it in a heavy, black 3-ring binder. I labeled the spine in bold, block letters. Critical Infrastructure Redundancy Audit, Phase 2. Do not discard. ****. I walked down to the server room. Sorry, the meditation pod. The transformation was horrifying. The raised flooring had been covered in cheap rugs. The cooling units had been turned off to reduce the white noise. The room was sweltering. It smelled of ozone and hot plastic. Beanbag chairs were scattered around the silent, overheating racks like colorful tumors. I placed the binder on top of the main server rack, right next to a stick of incense that was burning dangerously close to a bundle of fiber optic cables. I knew exactly what would happen. The cleaning crew, hired from a new, disruptive gig economy app to save money, would come in tonight. They wouldn't read English well, or they wouldn't care. They would see a dusty binder in a chill zone. The next morning, when I walked past the dumpster out back, I saw it. My binder, resting on top of a pile of discarded ergonomic chairs. I took a picture of it with my phone. Timestamped. Geotagged. Evidence, I whispered to myself. I wasn't just stealing the company. I was documenting their negligence so thoroughly that when the lawsuits hit, I wouldn't just be innocent. I would be the prosecution's star witness. The grim poetry of it all was almost too much to bear. The smell of wet cardboard and trash juice filled my nose, but to me, it smelled like victory. Or maybe that was just the garbage. The quarterly alignment mixer was held at a rooftop bar downtown that charged $20 for a cocktail that was mostly ice and pretension. It was mandatory attendance, which meant I had to put on a blazer over my bitterness and pretend I didn't want to throw myself off the ledge. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and desperation. The stock price had dipped 12% since Jordan took over, but the DJ was blasting upbeat house music as if to drown out the sound of the shareholders screaming. I stood by a heat lamp, nursing a club soda with a lime that looked like it had been sliced with a rusty spoon. I was watching the new Vice President of Vibes, a real title. I checked the org chart, tried to hit on the HR director. It was grotesque. Evelyn. I turned. It was Marcus, the CFO. Marcus was one of the old guard. He looked tired. The bags under his eyes had their own luggage tags. He was holding a scotch like it was an anchor keeping him from drifting away into the night. Marcus, I said. Nice party. The shrimp is almost thawed. He didn't smile. He leaned in, lowering his voice, glancing over his shoulder. They're scrubbing the budget next week, Ev. Deep clean. I thought they already did that when they gutted my team. No, he shook his head, looking around to make sure Jordan wasn't nearby. She was currently taking selfies with the marketing interns near the ice sculpture. I mean total restructuring. They're going to outsource the entire backend to a firm in Bangalore. Jordan signed the letter of intent this morning. Your department, the archiving role, it's gone on the 1st of the month. I felt a cold spike in my chest. Not fear. Adrenaline. Pure, uncut adrenaline. The 1st of the month, I repeated. That's in 4 days. I shouldn't be telling you this. Marcus sighed, taking a heavy swig of his drink. You built this place, Ev. I remember when we were soldering cables in the garage back in '04. I wanted you to have a heads up. Update your resume. Thanks, Marcus, I said softly. I appreciate it. Really. I looked at him. He was a good man, mostly. Just weak. He'd let them bulldoze him because he had 2 kids in private school and a massive mortgage in the suburbs. He was trapped. Don't worry about me, I added, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. I've got a plan. Good. He patted my shoulder, his hand heavy. Keep your head down. He walked away, merging back into the crowd. I watched him go, feeling a strange pang of pity. He thought he was saving me. He didn't realize he was on the Titanic, rearranging the deck chairs, and I was the iceberg waiting in the dark water. I pulled out my phone. I didn't update my resume. I opened the admin app for the company's cloud registrar. The training budget I'd been using had allowed me to pay for a comprehensive system migration simulation. That was the cover story. The reality was that I had set up a mirror of our entire cloud environment under the Veritas IP Solutions account. All I had to do was flip the switch. Point the DNS records away from the company's account and toward mine. I looked across the rooftop. Jordan was laughing, her head thrown back, a flute of champagne in her hand. She looked so confident, so untouchable. She thought technology was magic. She thought you just paid a subscription and things worked. She didn't understand that technology is plumbing. It's pipes and pressure and filth. And if you piss off the plumber, you're going to drown in shit. I tapped the screen. Confirm DNS migration? Yes. A little loading circle spun. I took a sip of my club soda. Asterisk migration complete. Propagation time, 24 to 48 hours, asterisk. By Monday morning, the company wouldn't just be outsourcing their backend. They would be trespassing on it. I finished my drink and walked over to the buffet. I picked up a skewer of chicken sauté. It was dry. Hey, Evelyn. Jordan shouted over the music, waving me over. I walked toward her, forcing a smile that felt like I was baring my teeth. Great party, right? She yelled, swaying slightly. We're really building culture here. It's certainly something, I shouted back. Hey, I wanted to ask. She leaned in, smelling of white wine and expensive hairspray. Did you finish that training on, what was it? IP compliance. Oh, absolutely, I said, my voice steady. I passed the final exam tonight. Love that growth mindset. She high-fived me. Her hand was clammy. We're going to need you to train the new team in Bangalore next week before before you fire me, I offered. She blinked, her smile faltering for a nanosecond before recovering. Before we transition. You don't be so dramatic. Right. Transition. I checked my watch. The propagation had started. Somewhere in a server farm in Virginia, a digital handshake was happening. The locks were being changed. I pulled out my phone again and drafted a quick email to Marcus. Subject, thank you. Asterisk body, Marcus, thanks for the drink. If things collapse next week, check your personal email. I've sent you a file containing the metadata for your pension fund. I made sure it's backed up externally. You might need it to prove you didn't embezzle anything when the audit happens. Ev, asterisk. I hit send. Then I walked out of the party, leaving the noise and the fake smiles behind. The elevator ride down was silent. I hummed a little tune. It was the Jeopardy theme song. Time was ticking. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The air in the office was different, charged with a static panic. People were hovering around printers that refused to print. The coffee machine, which was IoT-enabled for some godforsaken reason, was displaying a network error message and refusing to dispense caffeine. I sat in my closet, waiting. 9:02 a.m. My screen flickered. A pop-up window appeared. Asterisk, your session has expired. Please log in again. Asterisk. I typed in my password. Asterisk, account locked. Contact administrator. Asterisk. Here we go. I tried to access my email on my phone. Authentication failed. They weren't waiting for the first of the month. They were doing it now. A company-wide announcement blared over the PA system. It was the new IT director, the hashtag guy. His voice cracked. Attention team. We are experiencing a minor security incident. A sophisticated phishing attack has compromised several legacy accounts. As a precaution, we are locking down all non-essential access. Please reboot your machines and wait for further instructions. Phishing attack. I laughed out loud. A dry, hacking sound that startled a spider in the corner of the room. They were framing me. Or at least using security as the cover to lock me out before they marched me out. It was the oldest trick in the book. Blame the person you're firing for a breach so you can escort them out without severance. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the IT automated system, which I had programmed 3 years ago to alert me of any admin changes. Alert. User Evelyn_R removed from group. Admin. Alert. User Evelyn_R removed from group. VPN_access. Alert. User Evelyn_R removed from group. Cafeteria_awards. Petty. They even took my free sandwich points. That hurt more than the admin rights. I leaned back in my chair, putting my feet up on the desk. They thought they were locking me out of the building. They didn't realize I had already moved the building. The lockout was actually perfect. It confirmed that they had no idea what was happening on the back end. If they had checked the DNS records, they would have seen the migration. But they were too busy locking the front door to notice the foundation was sliding away down the street. I opened my personal laptop, a ruggedized ThinkPad I kept in my bag. I connected to the guest Wi-Fi. Password, Innovation 2024, because of course it was. I logged into the Veritas IP Solutions dashboard. The dashboard was a sea of green lights. Asset, domain names, secure. Asset, cloud instances, secure. Asset, software licensing, secure. I watched the traffic logs. I could see the company's internal requests hitting my servers. Request, payroll database access. Status, allowed for now. I had set a timer. 72 hours. For the next 3 days, everything would work normally. The training simulation mirrored the live environment perfectly. They wouldn't know they were running on my infrastructure. They wouldn't know they were burning my bandwidth. But on Friday at noon, the lease would expire. There was a knock on my door. Sharp. Aggressive. It didn't open because I had wedged a chair under the handle. Evelyn. Open up. It was the head of HR, a woman named Linda, who smiled with her mouth but wanted to murder you with her eyes. I removed the chair and opened the door. Linda was standing there with 2 security guards, Paul and Dave. I knew Paul. We used to smoke together behind the loading dock. He looked ashamed, staring at his boots. Evelyn, Linda said, clutching a clipboard like a shield. We need you to come to conference room A immediately. Is this about the phishing attack? I asked, feigning innocence. It's about a serious misappropriation of company funds, she snapped. Bring your badge and your laptop. I can't bring the laptop, I said. It's locked. Just bring it. I grabbed my bag. I looked at the framed photo of Buster on the desk. I left it there. I'd be back for it. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd buy the building and turn this closet into a shrine for him. Hey, Paul, I nodded to the guard. Sorry, Ev, he muttered, looking at the floor. "It's okay," I whispered as I walked past him. "Make sure you cash your paycheck by Friday morning." His eyes widened. He didn't ask why, he just nodded. We walked the long hallway to the executive suite. People stared. The perp walk. It was designed to humiliate, to make everyone else afraid. I kept my head high. My boots squeaked on the polished concrete. I wasn't a prisoner walking to the gallows. I was the executioner walking to the switch. I entered conference room A. Jordan was there. The legal counsel was there. The #IT guy was there. And in the center of the table was a stack of papers. My training invoices. "Sit down, Evelyn," Jordan said. Her voice was trembling slightly. She was excited. She finally had a reason to kill the witch. I sat. The leather chair squeaked. "So," I said, looking around the table. "Who wants to start?" The air conditioning in conference room A was set to Arctic, presumably to preserve Jordan's Botox. She sat at the head of the table, flanked by the lawyer, a man who looked like he billed by the heavy sigh, and the IT director, who was frantically typing on a tablet that clearly wasn't connected to anything. "Evelyn," the lawyer began, sliding the stack of papers toward me. "We've been reviewing the departmental spend for the last quarter." "Riveting reading, I'm sure," I said. Jordan slammed her hand on the table. "Cut the crap. You spent over $150,000 on training and compliance in 3 months. Webinars. Workshops. Who the hell is Veritas IP Solutions?" "A specialized vendor," I replied calmly, leaning back. "They handle high-level infrastructure certification and asset management simulation." "It was all approved." "Approved by who?" she demanded. "By you, Jordan." I reached into my bag. The security guards tensed as if I was going to pull out a weapon. I retrieved a folder. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was the budget authorization form. Signed, Jordan Coop. Date, 2 months ago. She snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it. Her face flushed a blotchy red. "I sign hundreds of these a week. I didn't know you were funneling money to a shell company." "Careful with the accusations," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Veritas is a legitimate entity. Every dollar spent resulted in a tangible deliverable. Certificates were issued. Assets were processed." "Processed?" The IT director piped up. "We can't find any record of this training in the HR portal." Because it wasn't HR training, I explained slowly, as if talking to a toddler. It was technical compliance. The deliverables are in the cloud, which we can't access. Jordan screamed. "Because you locked us out." "I didn't lock anything," I said. "The system locked me out. Probably a security protocol. If I were still the admin, I could fix it in 5 minutes. But since I'm just the archivist." "You're fired." Jordan spat the words out. "For cause. Gross misconduct. Embezzlement. Incompetence." "Embezzlement is a strong word," the lawyer murmured, looking nervous. "Maybe we just stick to restructuring." "No." Jordan stood up. "I want her gone. I want her sued. I want her 401k frozen." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You are a dinosaur, Evelyn. You've been bleeding this company dry for years with your expensive servers and your legacy contracts. We're done. Get out." I stood up slowly. My knees popped. "Okay," I said. "That's it." She looked confused. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to beg. "That's it," I said. "You're firing me." "I accept. But Jordan, one piece of advice." "I don't want your advice." "You're going to need it," I said, walking to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. "You mentioned the servers were expensive." "You were right. They are. And now that you fired the person who managed the lease, you're going to find out exactly how expensive they really are. Get out." Paul and Dave escorted me to the lobby. I handed over my badge. "Good luck, guys," I said. I walked out the front doors into the blinding sunlight. I took a deep breath. It smelled of exhaust and freedom. I walked to my Subaru, got in, and lit a Marlboro. My hands were shaking just a little, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. I picked up my phone. I logged into the Veritas app. Tenant. Redacted Corp. Status. Delinquent. I changed the status flag. Action. Initiate termination sequence. Timer. 72 hours. You want a dinosaur? I exhaled a cloud of smoke at the windshield. I'll show you an extinction event. I put the car in drive and headed home. I had a lot of packing to do, and I needed to buy some popcorn. Friday arrived with the deceptively gentle warmth of a spring morning, the kind where the birds are chirping and the world feels full of promise, completely unaware that a meteor is streaking toward the atmosphere. I sat on my front porch, my legs tucked under me in a pair of flannel pajamas that had seen better decades, nursing a mug of coffee that I'd fortified with a generous splash of Irish whiskey. Before we dive deeper into the chaos, let me know in the comments, what city or country are you watching this from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, back to the countdown. My phone sat on the small wicker table next to me, screen up, silent. It was 9 a.m. The start of the business day. The start of the end. At 9:15 a.m., the silence broke. It started as a single vibration, a short, angry buzz against the glass tabletop. Then another. Then a steady, rhythmic pulsing that sounded like a heavy insect dying. I didn't reach for it immediately. I took a slow sip of the hot coffee, letting the whiskey burn the back of my throat, and watched a neighbor walk his golden retriever. The dog looked happy. I felt a kinship with that dog. We were both having a great morning. I finally picked up the device. The lock screen was a waterfall of notifications. Asterisk alert. SSL handshake failed. Port 443, asterisk. Asterisk alert. API gateway timeout. Error 504, asterisk. Asterisk alert. Database connection refused. User, admin not found, asterisk. It was the automated monitoring system, the one I had built from scratch 5 years ago to wake me up in the middle of the night if a server so much as hiccuped. Now it was singing the song of total systemic failure. Then came the texts from my old team. The survivors. Asterisk, Ev, are you seeing this? The payment portal is throwing security warnings. Chrome is flagging us as unsafe. Asterisk. Asterisk, hey, did we change the Salesforce integration? Everything is bouncing back. Asterisk. Asterisk, Ev, please tell me you have a backup key. The CRM is encrypted. Sales can't log calls. Asterisk. I didn't answer. I swiped the notifications away, one by one, cleaning my digital house while theirs burned to the ground. At 10:30 a.m., the phone began to ring in earnest. The caller ID flashed a name I expected, Braden, IT director. This was the hashtag guy. The one who thought infrastructure was a type of yoga pose. I let it ring. The vibration rattled the spoon on my saucer. He called again. And again. On the fourth attempt, he left a voicemail. I played it on speaker, leaning back in my chair, closing my eyes to savor the bouquet of panic in his voice. Evelyn? Hey, look, man. I don't know what you did, but everything is red. The dashboard is saying license expired. What license? We paid Microsoft last month. I have the receipt. You need to call me back. People are freaking out here. I chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. He thought it was a Microsoft license. That was almost adorable. He was looking for a paper jam when the entire printing press had been melted down for scrap. By noon, the inevitable happened. The propagation period was over. The DNS records had fully updated across the global servers. I opened my laptop and typed in the company's URL. Gone was the slick, animated homepage with its stock photos of diverse models laughing at salad. Gone was the About Us page filled with buzzwords about synergy and disruption. In its place was a stark, white page with simple, brutal black text. This domain is parked courtesy of Veritas IP Solutions. Status: delinquent. Contact owner for inquiries. It was a digital tombstone. I could only imagine the scene inside the office. The open plan collaboration zone would be a riot of confusion. The sales team, fueled by energy drinks and commission checks, would be unable to close deals because the CRM was offline. The developers, the ones who actually knew how things worked, would be staring at their terminals, realizing the Git repositories, the code libraries that held the product together, were locked behind an authentication wall they didn't have the keys to. And HR? They couldn't even process payroll because the secure gateway to the bank was routed through a VPN that I had just turned off. At 1 p.m., I got a text from Paul, the security guard. Asterisk, chaos. Jordan is screaming at a laptop in the break room. Someone threw a chair through the glass wall of the meditation pod. It shattered everywhere. Twitter boy is crying in the hallway. Miss you. Asterisk. I smiled and typed back. Asterisk, keep your head down, Paul. And maybe stand clear of the glass. Asterisk. At 2 p.m., realization must have finally hit them. The new IT director, Braden, presumably after exhausting his vocabulary of curse words, finally did what any competent junior admin would have done at 9:05 a.m. He ran a WHOIS lookup on the domain and the IP blocks. He wouldn't see the company name. He would see Veritas IP Solutions. He would check the vendor list. He would see the invoices Jordan had rubber-stamped. And then, if he was smart, and I was giving him a lot of credit here, he would find the breadcrumb I left. I had hidden a digital certificate inside the metadata of a file on the shared drive. It was a JPEG image of the goodbye party flyer they had never thrown for me. If you opened the image, it was just a picture of balloons. But if you opened the file in a text editor or scanned the hex code, you found the deed. Asterisk asset custody certificate, all digital infrastructure, including but not limited to domain names, server leases, and cloud topology, is the sole property of Veritas IP Solutions. Usage rights granted to company name are revocable at will. Asterisk. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID didn't say Braden. It said Richard. The CEO. The father-in-law. The man who had been retired for 2 years, spending his time golfing in Boca Raton and letting his family run his legacy into a ditch. Richard never called unless the building was physically on fire. Well, the building wasn't on fire, but the virtual foundation had just been nuked from orbit. I let it ring 3 times. Power move. I took a sip of my spiked coffee, cleared my throat, and picked up. Hello, Richard. Evelyn. His voice was gravel and smoke, shaking with a rage that traveled 1,000 miles over the cell network. What the hell is going on? Jordan says you hacked us. She says you're holding the company for ransom. Ransom is such an ugly word, Richard, I said, watching a squirrel bury a nut in my lawn with industrious precision. I prefer asset management negotiation. This is illegal, Evelyn. Richard roared. I could hear the wind whipping the microphone of his phone. He was probably standing on the 9th green. I have lawyers on the other line. I'll have the FBI at your door in an hour. You can't just steal the company. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Richard, I said, keeping my voice level, the voice of a woman explaining why you don't stick a fork in a toaster. It's not a hack. I have the receipts. Jordan signed them. She signed what? Transfer of ownership forms disguised as compliance training. I lied. Well, partially. She authorized the budget. She authorized the transfer of the IP to a third-party vendor to mitigate risk. That vendor is Veritas IP Solutions, which I own. There was silence on the line. Heavy, stunned silence. The wind howled in Florida. She signed over the IP? She didn't read what she was signing, Richard. She never does. She was too busy pivoting to a lean-forward posture. The documents clearly stated that the company was divesting its legacy infrastructure to a managed service provider. That's me. I am the provider. You tricked her. I followed procedure, I corrected sharply. I submitted the forms. I got approval. I executed the plan. The fact that your COO is legally illiterate is not my problem. Fix it, he growled, the fight starting to drain out of him. Turn it back on. Now. I can't just turn it on, Richard. We have a billing dispute. The company is currently utilizing my proprietary infrastructure without a valid contract. The previous lease expired at noon today. How much? He asked. The question hung in the air. He was a businessman. He knew when he was cornered. He knew that fighting this in court would take months. In those months, his clients would leave, his stock would zero out, and his legacy would be dust. I did some mental math. The old rate, my salary plus the budget, was subsidized by me. By my unpaid overtime. By my stress. By the weekends I spent fixing his messes while he was on a boat. The new rate needed to reflect the market value. Plus a stupidity premium. I want a 5-year licensing agreement for the use of the infrastructure, I said. Non-cancelable. Guaranteed payments. Fine, he snapped. How much? For $1 million a year, I said. The silence stretched out again. The old budget for my entire department was maybe $800,000. That's extortion, he whispered. That's the price of agility, I countered. Jordan wanted to move to the cloud. Welcome to the cloud, Richard. It rains here. I'll sue you. I'll tie this up in court for years. You can try, I said, my voice hardening. But court cases take time. Your servers are down now. Your customers can't log in now. Your data is encrypted now. Every hour you're offline, you lose roughly $50,000 in revenue and brand trust. Do the math. Can you afford to wait for a judge to read the fine print? He breathed heavily into the phone. I heard the rattle of a golf cart. If I pay, you turn it back on instantly? Instantly. And Jordan. That's an internal personnel matter, I said. But I suspect her training is complete. I'll send the contract, he said, sounding 10 years older than he had a minute ago. But, Evelyn, you're done in this town. You'll never work in tech again. Richard, I laughed, a genuine, bubbling sound. With $4 million a year, I'm not looking for a job. I'm retiring. I hung up. My hands were sweating now. I wiped them on my pajama pants. I had one. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more loose end. A physical one. The company leased their fancy downtown office space. It was a prime location, exposed brick, glass walls, an espresso machine that cost more than my car. What they didn't know, what even Marcus, the CFO, didn't know, was who the landlord was. Years ago, when the company had been in trouble, they needed cash. They sold the building to a holding company and leased it back. That holding company was Red Brick Trust. And the primary beneficiary of Red Brick Trust was my late father's estate, which I managed. Jordan had been late on the rent for 3 months. She kept saying the check is in the mail, claiming they were switching payment processors. In commercial real estate, 3 months isn't a mistake, it's an eviction event. I looked at the clock. 2:30 p.m. I picked up the phone again. Hello, Sheriff's Office? Yes, this is Evelyn regarding the eviction notice for the property on 4th and Main. Yes, the paperwork is ready. Go ahead and serve it. Richard was frantically having his lawyers draft a $4 million surrender treaty. Jordan was trying to rally the troops. According to Paul's texts, she was currently standing on a desk in the bullpen, shouting about sabotage and industrial espionage. She had called the local news. A van was parked outside. She was going to play the victim. She was going to spin this as a cyber-terrorist attack by a disgruntled employee. It was a good play. It might have even worked. If she had a building to do it in. At 3:15 p.m., 2 sheriff's deputies walked into the lobby. They weren't there to arrest me. They were holding a large orange sticker. Paul texted me, *, cops here. Are you in trouble? *. I replied, *, no, but Jordan is. Watch the front door. *. The deputies walked past reception, where the receptionist was currently weeping because her Instagram wouldn't load, and headed for the elevators. They went up to the executive floor. I wasn't there, but I knew the script. I had written it. They would ask for the person in charge. Jordan would step forward, straightening her blazer, thinking they were there to take her statement about the hack. She would probably try to use words like synergistic threat vector. They would hand her the document. * notice to quit. Eviction for non-payment of rent. *. The lease for the office space had a strict clause, automatic termination upon 90 days of delinquency. Jordan had prioritized paying the agile coaches over paying the rent. She assumed the landlord was some faceless trust she could charm or bully. She didn't know the landlord was the woman she called a dinosaur. I imagined her face. The confusion. Then the rage. You can't evict us. We're a tech company. Ma'am, you have 24 hours to vacate the premises or we will remove your property to the curb. The irony was delicious. She wanted to move everything to the cloud. Well, now she had to, because she didn't have a floor anymore. My email pinged. It was the contract from Richard. DocuSign, licensing agreement between company and Veritas IP Solutions. Amount, $4 million /annum. Terms, immediate execution. I signed it on my phone. Evelyn R. Then I sent a reply. Subject, contract. Richard. Asterisk contract received and signed. Systems will be restored within the hour. However, please note that this agreement covers digital infrastructure only. It does not cover physical office space. I understand your current lease has been terminated due to non-payment. If you wish to negotiate a new commercial lease, my rates have also pivoted. Asterisk. Ev. I poured myself another drink. The sun was starting to dip lower, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I decided I would go into the office one last time. Not to work, but to collect. I pulled up to the office building at 5 p.m. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the glass facade. There were people standing on the sidewalk with boxes. The eviction had started. The news van was there, but the reporter looked bored. It's hard to make accounting error leads to eviction sound sexy for the 6 o'clock news. I walked through the sliding doors. The lobby was chaos. People were arguing. Someone was stealing the espresso machine, wrestling it toward the revolving door. Paul saw me. He tipped his cap. He didn't stop me. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. To the server room. The meditation pod door was propped open with a yoga block. Inside, the servers were silent, dark towers of metal. The air was stale and hot. Jordan was there. She was sitting on a beanbag chair, staring at a blank monitor. Her makeup was smeared. Her perfectly coiffed hair was coming undone. She looked very young and very small. She looked up when I entered. You, she whispered. Her voice was cracked. You did this. I did exactly what you asked, Jordan, I said, walking over to the main console. My boots clicked on the anti-static floor. I archived the assets. I managed the vendors. I streamlined the overhead. You destroyed the company. No, I said, sitting down at the console. I saved it. For a price. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the physical authenticator key, the one I had kept in my bra during our last meeting. I plugged it into the USB port. The screen flickered to life. A green cursor blinked in the darkness, a heartbeat returning to a corpse. Richard signed the deal, I said, my fingers flying over the mechanical keyboard. The sound was rhythmic, soothing. You have your servers back. But the building, you'll have to talk to my real estate agent about that. And I warn you, she's a shark. Why? Jordan asked, tears finally spilling over. Why burn it all down? I stopped typing and swiveled the chair to face her. Because you didn't respect the plumbing, I said softly. You thought you could just paint over the rust and call it innovation. You forgot that someone has to keep the lights on. You treated the people who built the foundation like they were the dirt you were standing on. I turned back to the screen. Command, restore system image. Confirm, Y/N. I pressed Y. Then enter. The room hummed. It started as a low vibration in the floor, then grew to a roar. The fans spun up, sounding like jet engines. The lights on the racks began to blink amber, then green. A cascading waterfall of activity. The AC kicked in, blasting freezing air into the room, blowing Jordan's hair back from her face. Out in the hallway, monitors lit up. Phones started ringing. The network error signs vanished. The beast was awake. I stood up. You're back online, I said. Try not to break it. I walked to the door. Wait, Jordan called out. She stood up, shaky on her feet. What about the training budget? The money. I paused in the doorway, silhouetted by the flashing green lights of the servers. Oh, that, I smiled. Consider it a consulting fee. You got a very expensive education today, Jordan. I hope you learned something. I walked out. I took the elevator down. I walked past the weeping receptionist, past the confused deputies, past the looted espresso machine. I stopped at the security desk. See you around, Paul, I said. I'll send you a job offer next week. I need a head of security for my new venture. It pays double. He grinned, his gold tooth flashing. You got it, boss. I got into my Subaru. It was an old car, unpretentious, reliable. I didn't look back at the building. I didn't need to. I owned it. I drove home, the window down, the cold evening air rushing in. My phone buzzed. Bank notification. Wire transfer received. Amount $4,000,000.00. I turned up the radio. It was playing classic rock. I lit a cigarette. I was unemployed. I was a pariah in the corporate world. I was the old tech lady. And I had never felt more alive. Later that night, I sat on my couch, watching the local news report on the mysterious outage at a local tech firm. I opened my laptop and logged into the company's accounts payable system, which was now running smoothly on my servers. I sent one final invoice. Asterisk invoice #001 Vendor, Veritas IP Solutions. Description: final training session identifying real ownership. Amount $1.00. I hit send. We're all healed. Not every victory needs applause or a corner office. Sometimes, walking away with your dignity and the deed to the building is the real promotion. Thanks for being here. I'll catch you in the next story.